Well, hello, avid readers of Christian fiction. Thank you for joining us. Now, I have a sweet friend, an amazing author joining us today, Lisa Bergren, and we're going to be talking about some of her awesome books. But first, Lisa, before we jump into the books, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
I'm Lisa Bergren, and I am a writer of many things. I've written quite a bit of Christian fiction. I think I'm somewhere around 20 titles in fiction, but I have over 65 total books. I've written for kids, I've written gift books, I've written some nonfiction, a devotional or two. I'm almost as diverse as my friend Tricia Goyer.
I was thinking because people are like, how can you write all these things? I'm like, well, Lisa Bergren does it too. So
I led
we
you astray.
Yes, we just love doing all the different things.
Sticky fingers.
Yeah, I love it. Now, and you live in Colorado and have
Yep.
3 wonderful kids, and I was thinking back to when we met. It was either 94 or 95, but I remember you being pregnant with your oldest daughter at the writers
Yeah.
conference, and so we have known each other. So how old is she? We've known each other a long time.
She is 26.
Yeah.
And my second daughter is about to get married in 6 days, so I'm a little frazzled right now. It's
So
crazy.
let's just sit and talk about books while you have a wedding coming in 6 days.
Ah! Today I realized that I had failed to order china, so we're gonna have plastic, and it will be fine.
That's good. It's fine. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We had plastic. It's good. It all works out.
Yes,
And people, yeah. It's the joy of the wedding. They love being there.
exactly.
Yeah, it's not gonna be a problem.
I
All
know,
right.
it's hard to not get lost in the details, though.
It's so true. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so I'll just tell you real quick. The day Leslie's reception, because she got married in the Czech Republic, I went there and we were like recreating the wedding ceremony. I forgot all the kids' shoes. They were in a bag at the house. So, we just pretended that that was the style. All the kids, 7 other kids were barefoot. It was fine. And they're like, "You
That helps
forgot
me to
the
know.
shoes." After we bought
Uh,
all the shoes, you have to buy all the shoes
oh,
and yeah.
so
So,
frustrating.
if you remember the shoes, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep that in mind.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about these books. So there's a 3-book series. The first one is Begotten, and I know you have them there too.
Yes,
And Betrayed, and
betrayed.
I don't have book 3 yet.
The
Um,
third one is blessed.
yay!
It's
All
in the
right,
mail to you. You
it's in
should
the
get it
mail.
any second.
Well, it's probably gonna be out there tomorrow.
My postal clerk is as behind on that as China. So,
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, okay, so I will tell you, I started reading this, and I love, like, your Captain's Bride series, and I've read, like, the Montana, like, Bridges was it Bridges in Montana?
Yes,
Yes, I love
the
that, and,
bridge.
The Bridge, yes, and I've read some of your devotionals, I love them, and bought in your children's book. I haven't read these, and so on the way back from the Czech Republic, I was like, "Wait, we've already been flying for 4 hours because I was so into these books. Um,
Yay.
and what I love is, first of all, it's, like, medieval, but it's
Hmm.
also supernatural, and it's also,
Hmm.
like, biblical, talking about the spiritual gifts, and so people have asked when I've been talking about this on Avid Readers, I'm gonna be interviewing you, they're like, "What genre?" Like, "What do you say?" 'Cause I'm like, "It's a medieval, spiritual, biblical ties." I don't know, historical, like, how would you describe it?
It's definitely a genre bender. It
Mhm.
crosses genres. It's historical, supernatural suspense, a little dose of romance, epic action. So it's kind of everything.
Yeah, I loved it so much. Okay, so the premise is, and I wrote this down so I could say it right. An illuminated letter believed to be written by St. Paul has surfaced, and it speaks of men and women with profound spiritual gifts. And I
Hmm.
literally just got goosebumps again reading it because I love the way that I learned about the illuminations and what was happening during that time. I learned about like history. I mean, there's so many layers to this book, but I
Hmm.
especially love like the spiritual gifts, how you represented like these different characters, unexpected characters have these spiritual gifts. So I'm just curious, like, how did you come up with this idea that just had so many layers and details?
Yeah, I think I have to back up and actually tell you that I was at a different writers conference years after we met in Colorado, and I had gotten to this place, this beautiful, sweet space where actually several publishers were wanting to work with me, which is kind of like the dream,
Mm-hmm.
right? We were
Yeah.
all working and working and working, and we finally get to that place. And I was at that writers conference in Colorado, and God very specifically said to me, this is a time not to move forward, to just be
Mm.
not write anything. I and the words he gave me were fallow season. And I'm not a farmer, but I
Yeah.
understood what that meant. And I went home and told Tim, I'm like, babe, I don't know how you're gonna handle this, but I think God's asking me not to write for a while. And God
Mm.
bless him. He was like, well, I guess you better do that then. And I didn't write a word for 3 years.
Wow.
Not a word. And in that time, I had my youngest child, Jack, who's now a senior in high school. And I started a new business that ultimately failed, but was eating me up alive.
Mm.
And a couple other things happened. And I just realized that had I been writing at that time, I probably would have had a nervous breakdown because
Yeah.
there was no way to handle the pressures that we have as writers and my normal life too. So
Yeah.
I was so thankful that I listened to God, and it gave me a really good restful time. I had that fallow season in terms of creativity. So then, when I started to think about writing again, I had actually just read The Da Vinci Code, which I
Okay.
really enjoyed, except for the heretical aspects of
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
So it was all awesome except for the heresy. So I wanted to find something with that kind of like that fun, interesting pace and multi layers and
Mm.
history. And so I started researching what could be some biblically based mysteries that I could delve into further. And my cousin, who's a pastor, said, well, what about the lost letters of St. Paul? And I said, what do you mean, the
What are
lost
you
letters
talking
of St.
about?
Paul?
Yeah.
And if you read in First Corinthians 5 and Second Corinthians, I think it's 10, I referenced it in the beginning of Begotten, Paul actually talks about previous letters he'd sent to them.
Mhm.
So then I just started thinking, okay, so what else could Paul have talked about? And I didn't want to write scripture. I didn't want it to be extra biblical.
Yeah.
So all throughout the series, it's potentially a letter from St. Paul, but it was never canonized, and we don't
Right.
know. All we know is that it's blessed and there's a holy purpose for it. And these people that are brought together are holy and doing God's work in the world. So spiritual gifts is something Paul talked about. So it was in tandem with what was consistent with what he did write about. But I never write any words and put them in his mouth. So that's how it started. And then I love Italy, fell in love with Italy. I've been 5 times. I want to go again.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it just was kind of a no brainer.
I love that. And okay, so you've been to Italy 5 times because I can like feel so much in the book. Like, oh my goodness. And I've never been to Italy. I've been to Spain recently. I've been to the Czech Republic and Paris, I mean France
Yeah.
and Germany, but I've never been to Italy. But through your book, I felt like I was in Italy and especially that,
Yay.
that medieval time period.
Hmm.
So you have the castles and you have the knights and then you also have the church and the bishops. I mean, I think that's so fascinating. And reading with my kids, we've been studying a lot of church history, and so just how you displayed like the bishops and what was happening in the church, and some of the things they were doing in the church, and then here's these people with spiritual gifts. They don't fit in the box. Like they don't fit
Right.
in the box that they were trying to create. So that I
Right.
in fact, I'm going to pass these on to my teen daughter because we read a lot of like biblical. I mean, church histories. I think she's going to love these. I kept them until we did our interview because I will never see these books again if I let her have them. But I
Okay.
love so much that you were able to talk about, the church and the history, but also there is this supernatural thing that kind of sometimes reminded me of Frank Peretti-ish
Hmm.
with what was going on. And so that was a unexpected element that like, ooh, this is a little scary, but I kind of like it.
Yeah.
Like, so talk about
Yeah.
that, how you were able to tie in because you mentioned these letters that could have been from St. Paul. You have the spiritual gifts, but also that like the fight between good and evil is physical. Like it's manifested in like people and events and stuff. So again, this is why we talk about these multi layers, because it was in parts like a Frank Peretti book where you see this battle kind of going on, but on the surface.
Yeah. I was really interested to delve into the spiritual warfare aspect of it because if
Hmm.
when God brings together people to do his good works in the world,
Yes.
and especially in a bigger way, they're going to encounter the enemy because the enemy doesn't want us to be doing
Hmm.
his good work in the world. So or God's good work in the world. So it's a natural and I love good versus evil stories. So
Yeah.
when Publishers Weekly called it, an epic good versus evil tale, think not Da Vinci Code, but Lord of the Rings. I'm like,
You're
yes,
like, this
exactly
is
what I was
it. What I was like,
going
yeah. I know I read that on the back of one of the books. I'm like, yay.
for. And so I was fascinated by that. As part of that was probably the most challenging part of
Mm,
research for me, just because I was scared. I was frightened to delve into the dark because for me to represent the dark in this series, I had to have some idea of what the
mhm.
occult might have been like at the time. And I had to, a lot of those scenes we fade to dark pretty fast, but you
Yeah.
get a good sense of what's going on. And Satan goes after us in a number of different ways, whether it be emotionally, mentally, financially, spiritually, physically, sexually. I mean, he goes after
Yep.
us every which way he can. And so in that this is edgy Christian fiction. I don't want your avid readers to think this is a sweet story. This is epic good versus evil. And so you see evil,
Mhm.
you feel the cold twinge of evil,
Yep.
but you also feel the warmth of the spirit and how he is right in the battle with us. So that's what I delved into. And I reached out to a couple of friends, while I was researching and asked, about their experiences. I talked to a number of people about healing and that their experience through that. So I really tried to make it as authentic and real, according to my friends' experiences, and trying to incorporate that so that we, as readers, might be ready for something similar in the future. So
Yeah,
that's how that all
absolutely.
came about.
Yeah, and I think it is scary when you are delving into those like occult things or dark things. For one of my books, Night Song, it was about the occult in Nazi Germany. And there
Yeah,
was like actually a lot of the things that you talked about, the different gatherings and different things. I'm like, okay, she represented this. This is like also happened in Nazi Germany. So I could tell, like,
yeah,
you could tell that the stuff you researched things that happened in the cult. And I couldn't work past like 2 o'clock on that book
right.
because if I did read anything or did anything even I'd have nightmares all night. I mean, it's
Right,
like some of the stuff you're like, and you can't even put all of it in a book because you don't
right.
want to show all of it in the book. But there
Yeah,
is, whether it was in medieval times, and there stuff was happening. Druids in Ireland. I mean, there was people doing occult stuff all
yeah.
over the place. And so it is
Mhm,
hard. Like, okay, we don't want to touch this, but it like you said, when we see the darkness, you could also see the power of the light, and to
definitely.
see especially the people coming together in the book, because unexpected people have spiritual gifts that come
Yeah,
together, and you can see them support together, and you can see prayers answered and miracles, which is just like, okay, this the light is there, the dark is there, and it's cool to see like in actual spiritual realms and physical realms you can see this
mhm,
battle going on.
mhm. And I think it's so important for us to think about today because if you're anything like me, you get caught up in your day and the day, everything that's on
Mhm.
your to-do list, and you forget that there's this whole spiritual realm
Yep.
about us, and that I just was reading a scripture about, and I can't remember what book it was, but basically an angel. It was, I think, it was Gabriel. He was coming down and he said, I couldn't come down because I was basically doing battle for 28 days
Yeah, it was
until
in Daniel.
Mike,
Yeah.
yeah, until Michael came and bailed me out. And then I
Yeah.
was finally able to be here. So there's reason for us to be aware of that realm and be thinking about how we need to be praying for as much of God's support as we can because we want to do God's good work in the world. And if we just stay blind to what's happening spiritually, then we're missing a big part of our lives.
Right, and I think sometimes we could think just people are acting a certain way because it's their choices, and we forget that there can be spiritual things going on. I was praying for one of my kids she's out of the house, but she's been really making bad choices and struggling. And one day in church, as I was worshiping, I could just picture myself like kneeling, and I saw like Jesus like sitting down or kneeling down with me, like, I'm here with you. It wasn't like a vision,
Right?
but I just had this sense that it was there. And so I really started every time I pray for her, I just like, okay, here I am, and you're right here. And
Yes.
within a week, she, like, reached out to me, and, like, lately
Mhm.
she's been coming around more, and I'm like, I coulda just been, like,
That's cool.
complaining, and of course I'm praying with her, but, you know, when you just go, like, "Okay, we're going deeper." We're like, "Okay,
Right.
Jesus, you and I are sitting here, and we're praying for this adult kid," but it's like, all of a sudden things happen, and it's almost surprising. Yeah,
But
but
yeah,
so
this
yeah,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
finish.
No, I was gonna say it's why but then when we're reading books like yours, I'm, like, reminded, like, "Okay, this is so much more than often we even picture."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is a hard, dark, broken world in a lot of ways. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful world, but we live in a broken world in broken times, and it's getting progressively more broken. And so our kids and we encounter evil all the time, whether we recognize it or not. And he's so subtle sometimes,
Mhm.
so subtle. And he also hits us over the head with a hammer sometimes too, like trauma. The things done to kids today just make my heart ache. And you talk about evil. It's present. It's right there in front of
Absolutely.
us.
Yeah, my husband was showing me a video, and it was this choir thing, and I won't go to the details what they were singing about, but they were saying, "You think we're after your kids, you think we want to pull them into darkness," and then it's like the song is like, we are after your kids," and it was like my husband showed it was like on YouTube, this, like, music video, and I'm like,
Wow.
"This is not subtle at all." They're like, "You think we're after your kids?" "Well, we are." I was like,
No,
"Oh my goodness."
no.
Yeah, so
It's becoming very
it is out there.
blatant.
It was
Yeah.
becoming yeah. Alright, so I would love for you to share, like, the elevator pitch of, like, the overarching story and the character don't I mean, there's so many characters to go into, but, like, tell just overarching what, um, the main characters and what the book is about as in Begotten.
Okay.
So and this
So
is here, we'll
Begotten,
start with that one.
let
Yeah.
me think back. So Begotten is about Daria D'Angelo,
Mhm.
and she's a heartbroken, pretty well-to-do merchant's daughter in the 1400s in Siena, Italy. And she is has gone on a pilgrimage to Rome,
Mhm.
Roma, as they call it. And there, as she's basically convalescing and kind of trying to recover, she runs across a priest who has had in his hands this secret letter for years and years, and he's been waiting to find who he's supposed to connect with. And here she is. And not only is she obvious to him because of what her gifting is at one moment, but also because she has her image has been illuminated in on the side column of
Yeah,
this
so
letter
cool.
that he
Yeah.
has. So begins their connection, and then they connect with a knight, and they connect with a couple of other people, and God continues to weave them together and build them from the inside out, so that they become braver and braver to use their gifting in the world. And the goal is to really affect change, because at that time the church, this is longer than an elevator pitch.
You're
Sorry.
fine, keep going, you keep going, I'm loving it. So, yes, I'm
at,
nodding with
at
you. Yeah,
the, I already sold it. I don't have to pitch it.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
um, at that time, the church is just the Catholic Church. I mean, that
Mhm,
was the church. There were no other options, and it's pre-Reformation, pre-Renaissance. And
mhm.
so, and at that time, the church had really gone off of its wheels. I mean, there was a ton of corruption within the church. There were
Yep.
good people, really good people, but there were really bad people too. They were
Mhm.
using that power for anything but God's good. So these people are drawn together to really help usher in change, to bring the scripture and the word to the people, to not say you have to go through this priest, but rather here it
Yeah,
is right in
yeah.
front of you. You all have access, and they start to speak the word in the native tongue rather than in Latin. And they are reaching and touching people, touching lepers at one point. Lots of people who are in desperate need for healing in different ways. That's really the lead, is the healing aspect, and that's really where even today we're moved by stories Christian stories when we hear about healing. So
Yep.
I really wanted it to be the impetus of and the front arrow of this attack into the world to change.
Absolutely, and so it goes and I love, like, because 'cause you'll have them coming in at different times, different people coming in, and they're seeing like, "Oh, you have this gift," and sometimes the people don't even realize that they have the
Right,
gift, and it's coming together, and I think so many times I mean, that is us in the church today. Like, we still
right.
have the same giftings that Paul talked about, that you talked about in these novels,
Yeah,
and sometimes it does take coming together with other people that will help us recognize the gifts and help us to realize like, oh, okay, maybe I do have a gift of prophecy, or maybe not, it is so much, it can be so different than often we see, like people aren't seeing visions daily, but they just have a like a knowing
right,
about things.
right.
So it's so, what I love about good fiction is it then makes you think of yourself and think of what
Yes.
you believe and then go back to the
Hmm.
Bible. So,
Yes.
yeah, so
Yes.
you do a great job of that, of like, "Oh, okay,
Thank
I
you.
can see this happening." And, "Oh, yeah, I can see how these giftings can not even be, familiar to people, but look when they come together." And so that was great. Loved
Good.
all that. Okay, so then you go on for 2 more books. So do they have the same characters? Does the
Yes.
story continue?
Yes.
Yes,
It's a three
yes.
3 book story for sure. You if you read book 1, you want all 3.
Okay.
Um, and it just continues to deepen and the stakes get higher. In book 2, Betrayed, then their enemy becomes much more apparent and much more on their tail, and they go through hell and high water through Betrayed. And Blessed is more of the same. So it's just that,
Mhm.
think Lord of the Rings. It's,
Yeah,
battle,
yep.
battle, 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 war, battle, battle, battle,
Yeah.
battle, war.
And I'm, like, this close to the end of book 1, so I'm like, "Okay, I need to get to the other ones," and so it's like, "Kids, can we do this? Can we do this?" I'm like, "I'm reading right now." "Okay, I'll
I
put the
love
damn book
hearing that.
down for a little bit." So, yes, but like I said, on the plane, I, like, read over half, like, because it was just, I'm flying and no one's bothering me. I can read. So I loved it.
That's good.
Yeah, alright. So, definitely wanna get all 3 books, and I have I have the paperbacks, but I also bought them on Kindle because,
Okay.
I was flying. So,
Yeah.
wanna let people know you can get them on if you have Kindle, or you can get the paperback books, and the covers are wonderful. I love
Thank
these so
you.
much. Yeah, they look really great.
And that
So,
Kindle version of Begotten is actually $1.99 right now.
oh,
So it's
good.
good time to jump in and try it on, see
Alright.
if it's a good fit for you.
Well, as soon as I read the first one, they're gonna have
Yeah.
to
No,
read
no, no.
more.
Begotten is I'm talking to your reader. So book
Yeah,
1.
exactly. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
And there's a question. It says, are there major differences between the original release and this re-release?
I so these books were released years ago. I can't remember how
Mhm.
many years ago. 10 years ago. Um At least the last one was about 10. And I got the rights back. So then this is really kind of my favorite series that I've ever written.
That is so cool.
And so I was really excited to reintroduce them to the world. And so there's not a big difference, although I did rewrite or reread every word. So I hope that I made things better because I think I've learned some things in the last 10
Hmm.
years, 10, 15 years. And so I'm a better writer. So I think I improved them, but I think if you read them before, you don't have to read them again.
Or you can, because they're great.
You can, yeah, if you've forgotten them.
If you've forgotten them and you just want to go down this journey again,
Yes,
then you can.
yes,
That's awesome. That's a really good question too. Okay, so tell us about some of the other books, your fiction. Now I
okay,
mentioned The Captain's Bride, which I
yes.
remember, like, when I first read that, like, "These are my favorite books, I love them." So tell us a little bit about that series and then some of your other novels.
The Northern Lights, which started with The Captain's Bride, was my first historical series that I wrote, and it was about a group of Norwegians who emigrated
Mhm.
and kind of their interwoven sagas. And so that was quite some time ago, Tricia.
I
we
know.
have we do go
This is
back.
this is dating myself because I remember when it released and I bought it at the bookstore and took it home and read it. So,
Back in the
yeah,
olden days.
in the olden days, yeah.
I wrote that. I've written other historical women's fiction like that. So the Colorado series is called
Mhm.
Homeward, and it starts with Breathe and then
Yep.
goes on to Sing and Claim, and it starts with a character that's struggling with tuberculosis, and
Mhm.
she's coming to Colorado because it was a really big place for treating TB in the day. I wrote the Grand Tour series, which is, in 1912, and it starts with a poor farm girl in Montana who finds out she is not all that thought she was. She was actually somebody else in terms of parentage. And she's swept up into this crazy, wild, rich world
Mhm.
where people send their kids off to tour the continent in order to complete their education. So they take the grand tour of Europe. So if you're hungering for some travel, it's a cheap way to go to
And
a bunch of different countries.
I bought that one on audiobook. So,
Okay.
I have not listened to it yet, but I'm like, "Oh, I
Okay.
forgot I had this one. I cannot wait to listen."
So if you're missing travel, that's a good
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
Um, One of my most popular best-selling series is called the River of Time series, and it's
Mhm.
YA. It's set in medieval Italy again, and it's about two girls who time travel back to medieval Italy, and really discover a lot about what life really is about. And I love that series. Again, it's a bit, well, it's medieval Italy, and then it's also a bit of a fantastical aspect that it just draws me. The supernatural fantasy draws me. So I think that's probably where I'm going next again.
Yeah, and, my teen daughters love that series, and I remember when we first adopted them, they're like, "I don't read Christian books," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay," so I'm just like, "Christmas present, slide this in there." The first one, my daughter, Maria, was like, "Okay, I need the next books in this." I think she read it in a day. Like, she
Yeah.
loved it, and so this is like so if you do have a teen out there that's maybe, like, thinking it's all, like, prairie romance or whatever, these books are not that at all. And that was the introduction. Once I said, see, there's really good books out there, then I was able to give them more. So Lisa, thank you for that
I
because
love
they
that.
were like, no, I don't read Christian books. And I'm like,
I love
try
that.
this. Yeah. So and
Well, and
Marie will still say, yeah, it's like her favorite series.
I love Marie. She's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote River Time because my own daughters were reluctant readers. And as an author, you're like, what? This is not allowed. You can't be a reluctant reader. And they just, they're distracted. It's hard to get them to settle
Hmm.
down and focus on a book. And so, I was trying everything with my daughter, Olivia. And she was probably 16 when I finally found Twilight.
Oh yeah.
And say what you will about Twilight, I'll be forever thankful to Stephanie Myers because it made Olivia a reader. She just
Right.
she's like, "Oh, you mean you think about books like after you close the cover? What? You want to know what happens next?
Yeah.
Yes, yes." So is that and Hunger Games, which caught my younger
Hmm.
daughter. And I thought, well, I want to set out to write something that captures readers like them, that catches their attention, and yet not be vampires or
Right.
killing everybody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how I ended up writing River of Time, which starts with waterfall.
Yeah, and someone else said River of Time is one of my most favorite book series ever. So you have other
Thank you.
fans out there that love the series, but I'm
Yeah.
telling you, Maria will still say like, "I love those books," and yeah. In fact, I was asking about a gift. I'm like, "I need to get a gift from someone," and she's like, "Oh, get that series." So we did. We got that series for a
Yay.
gift.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, so we talked about these books, and people are like, "Yes, I want to get them." So, where can they go find more information about you and your books? Oh, wait. And before we go, after you do that, tell us what you're working on next, because you did mention it
Okay.
just briefly. Yeah.
So you start with that?
Yeah. Start
What I'm
with
doing
either
next?
either one. Either one you want to do,
Okay.
you can do.
Okay, so I think what I want to write next is some sort of Scottish medieval in either straight history or maybe a fantastical aspect. I'm not sure yet.
Okay, you got
So
to do
right,
it. You got to do Scotland. Our family used to own a castle. This is our
what?
thing. So my grandpa, like I'm looking, my grandpa was born in Kansas, like they were in the Dust Bowl. They moved to California, got an ancestry, keep going back and back, and there was like sirs and ladies, and then they owned a castle. Mary Queen of Scots took away their castle, and so, but the castle's still there, and it is Darsey Castle in Fife, Scotland. And my son's like, we need to go get our castle back. So there you go.
You're gonna
I'm
go
just
storm the
throwing that
gates.
out there. Storming the gate, Darcy Castle, Fife, Scotland. There.
What a fantastic family history. I love that.
Yeah.
I have some ancestors too from Scotland, so it's been in my head. And we went a few years ago at Thanksgiving time and had an amazing trip. Just
Well, maybe we're
I fell in
related,
love with it. Maybe. I'm
like
sure we
from
are.
Scotland, our Scottish ancestors.
And so for me, my writing process is a lot of thinking
Hmm.
process, digesting, reading. I'm reading lots of Scottish history, reading more fiction in medieval times. Nearby, there's not a lot of Scottish medieval out there. So I just percolate and percolate and percolate. And somebody had asked, what's my writing process? Well, I do this for months,
Yeah.
read and percolate for months, and then I sit down and I write like crazy. I think
And just
you're the
get it
only
all out there. Yeah.
I think you are the only author I know that writes almost as fast or faster. I think you actually write
I
faster than
don't
I
know. I
do.
think we're both pretty fast. Yeah.
But I go to a hotel, or I used to go to the library, put on my headphones and just bomb through the words because I've been living with this story and the
Hmm.
idea for a long time, so it just plays out for me.
Yeah.
Um so that's probably what's next. We'll see how that comes together. And then in terms of finding my books again, you can find them. My website is lisabergren.com. And so it's Bergren. There's another
Hmm.
R in there. You can find me on Amazon or a lot of websites like Christian Book. But just find me. I'd love to connect with you.
Yeah. And it's awesome. They're great books. I've never been disappointed. So there's that.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and I really love them, and I've loved them from back in the day. So, and the series, like I said, I was just totally swept away as soon as I got into it. So we're gonna go through them again one last time. So there's Begotten and Betrayed
Betrayed
and
and blessed.
Blessed. Yay! They're so good. Well,
Yay.
Lisa, thank you for being here and just sharing about the books and sharing about your writing. And I love all you're doing.
Thank you for having me on. I love our friendship. I
Yeah.
hope you continue to
That's the
be
best part
well.
too. Yeah, and we'll go to Scotland together and research.
Yay!
We'll go look at Darcy Castle and wherever
We'll
your
take
ancestors are from.
we'll take our swords and our shields and take it
Get
on.
get our castle back.
Get back.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great night.